you know, just some background what I've done. I'm not the kick everybody's butt kind of bodybuilder. I just got into it with middle of the road genetics, and I needed to find a way to win, and that way was to learn as much as I could about nutrition and conditioning. So I'm the guy that shows up that looks like I have no skin because I can't win any other way. So what it did is it just kind of blossomed from there. I had a lot of people approach me and say, how do you get like that, get me like that? And I started scratching my head one day because I'm not terribly bright, but I'm no fool either. So I thought, I wonder if I could make a couple bucks doing this. So I started a business back early 2000. Happened to catch a break because that's when the internet, bodybuilding, message boards and stuff really started to take off, and the United States is considered the kind of the mecca, kind of the center of bodybuilding. So now I'm fortunate enough to be able to stay home with my kids, and they drive me nuts all day, and I don't get a whole lot of work done until they go to sleep at night. But it's still a lot better gig than it sounds. I do work with some athletes. Like I said, I've had NFL players that I work with, especially linemen, because they like to get kind of chunky in the off season. And then before they get back to camp, they decide they got to get it straight. So they come to Denver. I live in Denver, Colorado, just outside of Denver, Colorado, so our elevation is quite high. We have a United States Olympic training facility there for that reason, because if you train at a high altitude, you come down to regular elevation. Even fat linemen can run all over running backs for a couple of weeks, you know, until the elevation catches up with them. And as much as I know about elevation, I thought it was kind of funny that I ran into these numbers the other day, so just to give you perspective. But at a higher elevation, your body has to adapt to function, whether it be from a sports standpoint or not, with less oxygen. So your RBCs, your hemoglobin, and your hematocrit levels, they all change because your body has to try to function on less oxygen. It'll take 40 days, and this kind of surprised me because I go back and forth all the time, high elevation, low elevation. It'll take 40 days for your blood to return to normal when you go down to elevation. So I don't know if you guys are NFL athletes, but if you see the Broncos playing, my Broncos playing, dominating this year, when the other team's come in town and Peyton's running that no-huddle offense, he's killing them. He's killing those linemen because they're just sucking air so bad. So when I'm on the sideline sucking on oxygen, that's why. That's the reason, part of the reason that these athletes will come with me, come to where I am to train prior to going into their season or into camp. And nutrition and supplementation is a big part of that. I've trained for 30 years, so I know a lot about training too, and I'll touch on my ideas and philosophies around weight training for muscle, things like that. But my area of expertise is nutrition and conditioning, supplementation, that sort of thing. If you've got more skin than you want, my motto for my business is skin is overrated. So if you need to get rid of skin, I'm the guy that will skin on. Ideology and philosophy, and I'm real simple when it comes to this. And it sounds, you don't overcomplicate things. And we've all heard it a million times. We try to live by it. Are there trainers here too? I mean, who trains? Got a couple of them? Okay, cool. And two, at the end, if you want to talk, I know there was some talk about business. I don't have that up there, but I don't know to what degree. If you guys have questions about business, internet business, things like that, I'd be happy to answer those questions too. But not to overcomplicate things. And it was funny because I had a quick little story. I'm kind of a story guy. I'm a talker too. But I'm a story guy. So I've got a 13-year-old son. We have 4 kids, and only one of them's a boy. And so my 13-year-old son, he started working out. I used to train at the hardcore gym because I got to go in there and, you know, I got to be an animal and got to move weights. But I've got kids that want to go to the gym too, and I train with my wife now. And no offense to my wife, because my wife is cool, she's gorgeous, and after 20 years, she's still awesome. But I'm training with my wife. And that's a little different than training, you know, with another guy and trying to rip it up, you know, thinking that you're base and untouchable. So anyway, the kids want to come along, so I've knocked myself down a couple notches. So I don't train at Armbrust Pro very much, where all the pros, I don't know if you guys are familiar with bodybuilding, but I mean, Phil Heath was a friend of mine. I competed against him back in '03 when he competed in his first show and stepped on stage not having a clue what he was doing, pretty much just kicked everybody's ass eating McDonald's. And was certainly destined for the pro ranks, and apparently he's destined for his third Olympic win here this last weekend. And I don't know, I try not to take sides and be biased. I know a lot of the pros, but because I know him and I know the type of guy he is, I do like him and I do like to see him win. I think he's good for the sport. And there pretty much was him. I don't care who you're a fan of. Apologizing ahead of time, there was him, and there was everybody else this last weekend. He pretty much dominated, which was good to see. So his wife, if you guys know anything, his wife is battling breast cancer, which if you have a regular job to go to and you're trying to support your wife, do something like that, it is hard enough. You get to still stay on your game and remain at the top of your game, best bodybuilder on the planet. That's, I mean, I give anybody respect for that. So maybe one day we'll be off and Kai will win. So I don't know. It's a little jab at Kai. But back to the 13-year-old story. My son, we go to this, taking the kids down because they got to go to another gym. We got to go to a gym where everybody can do something. They go rock climbing, they can work out. So my son starts working out, and I'm watching him work out across the gym, and I'm thinking to myself, and it brought back memory when I first started, and this brings back the don't overcomplicate things. He's just bouncing around, doing what he wants to do and checking it out. He's growing because he's done nothing before. Hasn't done any training before, nothing specialized. Not terribly efficient, but he's getting it done. And sometimes I think when I'm looking at him, I'm like, I wish I didn't know what I know. Abdominals, when you get older, make you fat if you eat one. You know, if you're not training perfectly, you're not going to grow. And it reiterates the whole keep it simple thing. Yes, there's going to be a point where he's going to have to maybe come to me, and I'm going to have to help him set something up to become more efficient. But in the meantime, he's progressing so well that I just want to leave him alone and let him do what he wants to do. And that carries over into a lot of what we're doing. Sure, I've been training 28 years. Some of you guys have probably put in, or women, quite a few years too. So maybe a point you need to make it more efficient, and you don't want to waste time. I completely respect that. And if it's the case where you want to hire somebody, you know, Shanique or any of these other trainers, that can save you a lot of time too. But in the meantime, trial and error. There's something to be said for trial and error. When you play with things, when you play with your training and your nutrition, and you're making notes and you're keeping track of things, that's where you find out. I mean, there's a huge logical component here. You can keep track of what you're doing, and if you're progressing, great, keep doing it. If you're not, then you make a few changes. And that's the part about keeping it simple. When you keep it simple and the variables are low, you know what's working when it's working. And you know what's not working if it's not. Sounds simple, but if you're doing 12 different things, or you change 6 different things at once, and all of a sudden you start progressing, that's great, until you try to figure out why it is you're progressing and you don't have any ideas. So it comes back, again, to just keeping it as simple as you can and not overcome. And it really goes for anything, whether it's training, whether it's your nutrition, your supplementation. And I'll touch on supplementation with nutrition and skip loading. Just by a show of hands, and I don't know that anybody has, but has anybody heard of skip loading or refeeds? Or okay, cool. All right, right. All right, fair enough. And I want to, I'll go over that to competitors. Any competitors? Anybody compete or want to compete or is thinking about it down the road? Or okay, cool. Good to see. All right, you think right? Right there. No, that's good. That's cool. That's always good to see. So we have a mix, which is always nice. As far as training, look, Skip, what training protocol works best? No, Dorian, low rep, Mountain Dog. Anybody know Mountain Dog? John Meadows? No? Okay, high volume guy. Pretty big on the internet right now. He writes and works for elitefts as well. John Meadows, Mountain Dog Training. I use him as an example because he's a high volume kind of guy, and that hasn't been very trendy. I say trendy because everything trends. Training really isn't terribly complicated. Trainers will try to make it complicated, and writers for magazines. I wrote for Muscle Mag for quite a while. I still write for Flex every now and then, and we will throw in things, and there's just trends. Back in the 70s, when Arnold was training, high volume. You guys, he just would do a ton of work. Then it went to Haney, where it was 6 to 8 reps and that sort of thing, and more closer to failure training. Then you get to Dorian, Then we're real low volume, high intensity, rip every muscle in your body to where you can't compete anymore because, and all these ways are effective for a short period of time. Even after Dorian, when it comes back into the 90s, that was a high intensity, low volume. People still find DC training, dog training. Okay, DC is, I've worked with him for almost 10 years. He's based off of intense muscle. He also owns True Nutrition, True Protein, that sort of thing. His training is that low volume, high intensity as well. Very effective. I mean, I use it myself. I probably grew more in that 2 or 3 years than I had in a long time. But I pulled everything because I'm old and brittle. And so anytime you're pushing the envelope to where, and you have to get growth, you got to do something different that your body isn't used to. So even if you find something that works real well, and maybe the low volume, high intensity, it's only going to work real well for so long. And then you're going to battle with injuries, much like Dorian did. The guy ripped at pretty much anything he could rip to the point that he couldn't really compete anymore because it had changed his look so much. So it was a price that he paid. As much as I've had tons of clients who have had that type of, those types of results, big results. You lower the volume, to some degree you tend to recover a little bit better. But the higher volume, it all trends. It's coming back around now, which is nice to see, because when you get older, it's hard on your joints, it's hard on tendons, and you start pulling things, and you're constantly injured. So with the training, I don't really have one style of training that I advocate for. If somebody says to me, well, what do I do because I've been doing this training program and I haven't been progressing, then I want to know what they're doing at that point not progressing with, and then we're going to change it up. Basically, the body will grow from what it's not used to. So even if you're doing real well, like I said, you still want to change that out. And if you're old, there's a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration. One of the main ones too really is age. And how much have you beat yourself up? And a lot of times that's not I'm 43, and it's not as much as I'm 43 as I've been training almost 30 years. So it probably would be better to say I'm more like a 58-year-old because I've got bad knees, I got a bad back, because the more years, it's like your training years are dog years. The more years that you have training, that's really the most important thing, because even perfect form, and everybody should be training with as good control as possible to save your joints, save your back, save your knees, that sort of thing. But even when you're doing everything right, over time, and I say this over and over, it's a mantra that I have, that I've said for years, repetition in and of itself is degenerative. You can do the same, you can do the squats perfectly, but if you squat 10,000 times, your knees are gonna wear down, your back is gonna wear down. Benching, whether shoulders, your wrists, whatever, over time, you're just gonna beat them up. They're gonna wear down. Now you're gonna be really glad when you start hurting when you've been using good form, because if you weren't, it would have taken half that time. You'd be messed up. I've had back issues, probably the only thing that I've really dealt with over 30 years, but I've herniated the same disc 6 times, and it's a constant battle. But the alternative for any of us in dealing with injuries, that's why I don't have a whole lot of sympathy when people come up to me and say, oh yeah, I was going to keep having the injuries, and that's why I can't train my legs. I'm like, well, what do? They don't do anything. It's like, well, that's the alternative. It's like you just threw up your hands and gave up. Jesus. You got to find something to do. You may not be able to squat. Big deal. The only people who say squats make your legs huge are people who squat really well and can squat a lot of weight, because that's their gift. Squats can make your legs big, so can leg presses, so can hacks, leg extensions probably won't. But nonetheless, if you're moving weight, there are some people who are tall who just are not built the right way to squat correctly. So instead of forcing yourself into an exercise that could potentially injure you because it doesn't feel right, pass on it. I've seen plenty of guys. Same with deads. Everybody thinks they have to pull deads for a big back. Johnny L. did he, I posed this question to anybody who, Johnny O. Jackson, right, you guys, okay. Did the back, which came first, the big deadlift or the back? You know, which came first, chicken or the egg? I mean, it's one of those types of things. Is he pulling big numbers because mechanically he's built that way and his back is big and his back is strong anyway? Lats is another good example. Did he have legs, big, huge legs because he squatted all the time? Or did he squat all the time because he was so damn strong and he just looked sick squatting 315 50 times and he wanted everybody to look at him? You know, which one is it? And I'm not to say, all I'll tell you is, I've seen Bill Heath for years, and that man, if I explain how he trained, because it's different than what you see in the videos and the pictures, guy's never pulled a dead in his life. His idea of pulling a dead is if he dropped a 25-pound dumbbell off of the bench and he's got to bend over and pick it up. I've seen him get, and I'm not picking on him, I mean, I love the guy, I think he's a great guy. But I've seen him get ready for shows and only use machines. So sometimes when people say, well, you're telling me one thing, Skip, but I saw Phil train. Okay, Phil, here, just, and most of you might already get here. They're over here is like us. Okay, we're in this real big group of like 4 billion people. And there's Phil, and there's Kai, and there's Branch. We're so not, they should put them on another planet because they aren't that way because of the way they train. They aren't that way because of the way they eat. There's some other factors in there, but make no mistake, I know many people who use those other factors and they don't look like Phil and Kai. So really what it comes down to, and that's not to take away from them working hard. Clearly they work hard. That's a no-brainer. I guess my point is there's thousands and thousands of people who work every bit as hard as they do who will never have a chance to work that way. I trained for 28 years. I've done this in gyms that I think nobody on this planet could have trained harder than me. And I can't come in. I got as close, I took second to him in 03 at his second show, and that's as close as I'll ever get to him. Trust me when I say first and second wasn't as close as Phil and Kai, okay? There was one of the big gap. It just didn't look like it on the scorecard because there's ones and there's twos. Point being, when it comes down to it, what they do, really, you should forget about it. Because, and this is with trainers, if anybody's going to work with a trainer, anybody's going to work with a nutrition, you want to work with somebody who comes from those middle of the road genetics, maybe even bad genetics. Maybe he was just a fat, chubby dude, had no muscle, or she, for that matter. I mean, when you take someone who can take a situation and they had average middle-of-the-road genetics or poor genetics, and they did something with it, then they know something. Pros don't know much more than anybody else. They just react differently. Phil don't even carry a water bottle around. Or drinks 3 or 4 liters a day, or did. 4 liters a day. How many times have you been told you gotta drink so much water, you gotta do this? Phil don't have to. So there's a different set of rules. So, you know, the rest of us, my main point is just the rest of us are dealing with these average genetics, and we're not going to, that's not going to change. Someone's playing the hand you're dealt. You sit down at the poker table, anybody play poker? The game is not over when you're dealt your first 2 cards. It looks real good if you got a pair of kings. But the 6, 7 suited, you still got 5 more cards, and the straight flush will beat a pair of kings. You got to play the hand out, and sometimes that takes a long time. You play the hand you dealt. I like to say, I was dealt a pair of 6s 28 years ago. So you play the hand you dealt. As far as the high volume, low volume, high rep, low rep, again, you know, it just comes back to what you're doing now. If you're sitting there with a program that you don't think is very effective, take what you're doing and flip it over to something else. Your progress is recovered, okay? Most people train hard enough. And just, I gotta say this too. If you're thinking, well, I'm not really here, you know, to build muscle, I want to even tone, I want to get in better shape. You need to build muscle. There's nobody in this room who doesn't need to build a little bit of muscle. So that's why sometimes I cringe when I hear, oh, I just want to tone, or even train this, I just want to tone, I don't, or somebody says, I don't want to wake up tomorrow morning and be too big. Girl, I've been waiting for 28 years to wake up too damn big, and it has not worked yet, okay? At some point, if it did happen, you just go back to sleep and not train for a couple days. Everything will go away. If it came that fast, it will go that fast. You'll be all right in the end. It won't ever come that quick. So you work your butt off, you do get the muscle, because that's the hardest part. I think the dieting and everything is more to be a head game than eating. But if you're just losing weight, nobody, and I'll get to this when I talk about nutrition, and especially in cardio too, I kind of put them together. Nobody should be starving. No one should feel their strength. You shouldn't be dragging, feeling like you're pulling your tail, or your butt along behind you as you go through your day, not being able to function, that sort of thing. And I'll get into that more with skip loading and nutrition. And I try to separate the two, because my method of dieting is certainly not run-of-the-mill. So I'll cover both. I like to cover regular nutrition. Because even when you are skip loading and you're using that protocol, you still have what's considered to be a regular diet throughout the week anyway. But again, when things aren't working out for you with the training, you need to go and take a look at what you're doing and just flip-flop around. Recovery is the issue. If you are doing too much work and you're not sleeping, you're not getting the nutrition, then you're not going to be recovering and you're not going to be growing. And even if you say, well, I'm good with where I am, trying to maintain, if you're not recovering from your workouts, your muscle ain't going to look right anyway, because it's going to be flat. It's going to be big. You're just not going to look big. You're not going to look full. It's like not training for a couple weeks and sitting in sandals and eating a bunch of crepes every day. Not that I would use something like that. I have a crepe addiction. They're like crackers. I've been eating crepes twice a day. I would take my fat ass to the crepe place at 10:30 before they close and get 3 of them and take them back to the room. Because I know I'm going to be hungry at midnight. So I've got quite a mess to clean up when I get back, which is going to be hard because I leave for New York City 4 days later after I get back for a show. But anyway, I'll get it back. Before we move on, any questions with the training? Or?
Yeah, but first is thanks for putting on the one question, sometimes you'll see somebody or a personal trainer athlete, they have, like say, really good arms or a really big chest. Do you train different body parts differently? So like, for example, when you put in a program, some parts of your body respond better to high one, or some parts respond better to low intensity?
Good question. Yes, but it's not that simple. Usually if you're walking around and you see your trainer or you see somebody in the gym that has a good body part, they're like, they didn't really, usually, sometimes, but not usually, they didn't train that muscle any different than anything else, it just responded better. Okay? If you are that person and you want a balanced physique, then you need to take a look at the priority of your training and backseat those quality, if your chest is good and your legs are good, then don't give them priority. And when I say don't give them priority, early in the week, when your energy is higher, you want to train those weaker areas. Earlier in your workout session, maybe you have, I don't know how your workout is set up, but if you're training 3 muscle groups in a day and chest is your strong point, then you may not want to lead with that. The other thing that you have to look at too is, there's a couple reasons you might have a weak area. Okay, the weak area might be that you're training it. Legs tend to be weak for a lot of people because they just don't like to train. It's too hard, or they come up with some lame knee, back thing, disease that no one's heard of before. They diagnosed themselves with, and then you just look at it, I never heard of that. And I Googled it, and there wasn't nothing there. So that's one thing. They may not be training real hard, but there's the other aspect that it's overlooked a lot. I write about this a lot in my articles when I'm writing about training and recovery. Matter of fact, I write about it so much that my editor finally said, maybe you should write about something else. I'm like, well, people aren't getting it, so I want to keep writing about it. And that is overtraining a muscle group. Some people will come and they'll say, and this happens a lot with secondary muscle group, but shoulders, arms, things like that, they can't grow. Guys freak when their arms won't grow. It's hilarious. They just, I do everything. I don't know. You do everything, and then like, what do you mean by everything? I train 3 times a week, and I do. And if I'm offending anybody, because you're doing it, it's your own fault. I'll say that ahead. It's your own fault. Training arms 3 times a week because they're weak isn't going to allow for the recovery that you need. Plus, when you're training chest and back, arms are getting hammered anyway. I still say to this day, and I did this with myself, I'm real narrow-shouldered, and I got a problem. When I was trying to compete and win, I was too small and too narrow. So I'm thinking, man, I got to do more for chest and back and everything else, but I had good arms. And I would kick back and not do as much arm work, and the damn things would grow more. And what was happening is, most of it, I firmly believe this, and I write about this as well. When you train chest and back heavy, shoulders and arms, I believe, get most of the growth. Most of your arm and shoulder growth will come from the secondary work from back and chest. So when you're moving big numbers on back and chest, your arms will be grown. I don't believe that it's curls and press downs that make your arms big. But try getting a bodybuilder to not do curls and press downs. It doesn't work. It's like trying to take candy from a baby. It's not going to happen. So what I'll do is, and I have a training protocol that I put together and have written about extensively, where you train. Basically, the crux of it is you train back and chest twice as much as you train shoulders and arms, and that balances out the work with your upper body, so you're not overtraining arms. Now the problem is you got to actually get them to do it and stick with it. And then they only hit shoulders and arms maybe every 10 days. Then all of a sudden they're like, hey, you know, I'm curling more. First they'll tell you, oh, my arms aren't growing. They're just not growing. I don't like this is crap. My arms are getting smaller. I hear that a lot. My arms are getting smaller. They're training chest and back more, so they're getting smaller. And then when you get them talking and you start asking questions, they're stronger. Why are you getting stronger? Okay, there isn't a muscle in your body that's going to get stronger and not get bigger. It doesn't happen. I better be careful. If you're doing maybe triples and you're doing like a powerlifting type set, that's completely different. Okay, so if there's any powerlifting, then you got it. But other than that, if there aren't any powerlifters, then you get it. If you're in bodybuilding rep ranges and you're getting stronger, and that doesn't necessarily mean the weight goes up. If the reps are going up with the same weight, you're still progressing, you're still getting strong. That muscle has to grow. And just to make sure I cover the other side, when you're dieting and you're losing a lot of weight, and bodybuilders will do this when they're heavy weights and super heavies, they freak when they start losing muscle. You will. You'll be getting small. You won't lose muscle, but you'll be getting small. You'll be like, I'm shrinking. And then your boys will mess with you and they'll tell you you're getting smaller. That'll mess with you even more. And then you're like, I'm losing muscle. As long as you're holding strength, you're not losing muscle. You can't lose muscle and hold strength. It just doesn't work. Now, if you're losing strength, you can lose a little bit of strength and not necessarily lose muscle. I'll talk about that more when we get into the nutrition part, because then you get into going flat, losing energy, things like that. You got your top set at the beginning, you might still be strong, but you fade off real quick because you're low carb, low calorie. That's completely different. Genetically, we're all going to have those strong, you're going to have strong points, you're going to have weak points. Will your weak point ever be your strong point? 80% of the time, no. I mean, I'd like to lie to you and tell you, yeah, if you work real hard, boy, you're going to get there. And the reality is that's not the truth. Any more than, your parents telling you when you're 5'3" that you can, be an offensive lineman if you work hard. The message is real cool, and you do want to work as hard as you can. Again, playing the hand you're dealt. You want to get as big as you can. You want to balance your physique out the best you can, especially if you're going to compete. Everybody should go that route if they want to, without being, not everybody's going to be filled, not everybody's going to be perfect and balanced and go on to nationals and get a pro card. But you can still do a lot with what you have. You may still end up with those weak points, but you'll still progress. They'll still get better. I was born with a terrible chest, and I still got a terrible chest. It's just better than it was before. But it's not going to respond as good as other muscle groups. It's just, it might respond. It's not going to respond as good as everything else. So before I move on, anything else with any training or anything that strikes you guys? And I'm good. I mean, like I said, if you have questions, I'll take 20. It doesn't really matter.
just, I mean, as you say, like, overtrain.
Yeah.
My stuff is that I get way more than I'm seeing, so I don't know.
And see, those are variables that you have to take into consideration. So that's a good question. It's so individual that you do have to look at those things. Am I getting a lot of sleep? Do I have a stressful job? Am I get competitors who are like ER nurses. Way more stressful than me working on my computer in my office at home every day. I don't even deal with traffic. So all those things have to be taken into consideration as far as whether you're going to recover well or not. Even down to supplementation and how efficient your nutrition is and things like that too. How long you've been training, how high your volume is, how frequently you're training. So I give this is one of those questions that the answer is more of an opinion than anything else, because it really isn't a right or wrong answer. If you're going to train, say full body, okay, you can do that, and you can do that 3 or 4 times a week. But the volume has to be so low that you're able to recover, from workout to workout. I say that it's better to split up the muscle groups over the course of a week, 5 days. But then again, the more you split it up, you only hit a muscle group once a week, you can hit it with a higher amount of volume, because it's going to take a while before you come back around to it, so you've got time to recover. You also got to take into consideration the nervous system and whether you have that. If you're going to train 6 days a week and you're going to train, chest one day, biceps the next day, you're still training for 6 days. So my opinion, I always say this, in 90% of the time, there's always exceptions, but you want to rest more than you train. So if you train 3 days a week and you rest 4, that's a pretty good balance. Now people will say, well, wait, I'm far further than 3 days a week, because it seems very basic. But you shouldn't really approach it that way, because I've got high level amateur bodybuilders, professional athletes that can not only train in the off season for growth on 3 days a week very effectively, but even guys getting ready for shows. So it's harder when you get ready for shows, because you're going to be, when it gets closer to the show and you're dieting to lose a lot of body fat, then you do tend to run out of gas sooner. So it is sometimes better to train with less volume or less muscle groups in that session, and then spread it out over more days. But I say by and large, you should rest more than you. If you have a great recoverability, bump it to 4, come back to 3. But I mean, once you start getting over 4 days a week, that's a lot of training, and it's not a lot of recovery. My opinion. Yep.
Just picking up on your rest theme. Let's say you're working three times a week, and the question really is, do you rest more by doing, let's say you're doing 4 different kind of exercises, and instead of doing all the reps, 80 reps, you rest, well, let's say you normally do, let's say 15 or 20 depending on what you're doing, and then you rest for 2-3 minutes, and then you do 15, 20, and you repeat that 4 or 5 times, as opposed to splitting up those exercises and going a circuit so that you're integrating different exercises, and so that essentially you're resting one muscle while you're exercising the other, and you're coming back around on a circuit.
Gotcha. That's a different type of rest than what I'm referring to with his question. I say the rest between sets doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the sense that the work is still being done, and you have 2 ways to look at it. The longer you rest, the stronger you're going to be. You're not going to be as fatigued when you come back to it and hit it again. But at the same time, the other side of it too is the faster you go in between sets, you may not be as strong, but the intensity will be higher. So which one matters? Any of you want to answer it? Let me know. I mean, and the reason I say that is because it's anybody's guess. And that's where it comes back to, let's say you've been doing it one way for a while, and you got that strength. Strength is always important, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not the only thing that causes you, anybody who knows DC training or that type of training will tell you, you just broke that commandment. I'm calling Dante right now and letting him know that you just said that, because it's a cardinal I mean, that's like cardinal rule for decent training. You have to progress. So with that progression, here's my question. We were talking about it in the car on the way down here. If you did 200 pounds for 12 reps last time, then you got to come in and you got to do 220 with 12 reps, so you got to do 200 for 15 reps. So you get under it, and the only thing that matters is you get more reps, so you get more weight. So what do those reps look like? Maybe I'm just going to make them a little faster. Maybe I'm going to, I mean, when you're only focused on that number, and you're only focused on, I got to move this so many times, a lot of other things get thrown. The efficiency of that set, in my opinion, is going to be compromised for most people. I might look at it because I've been trained so long, go, okay, I got to beat these numbers, but I've got to work hard to not just increase the speed and bang, or even shorten the range of motion. There's a lot of ways to get different numbers. So you really have to look at it and go, okay, is the strength the most important thing? I don't think that it is. I think there are some times where I just won't even pay attention to my reps as long as they're higher than 6 or 7, and especially with calves. Something that you just have to destroy to get to grow. You might as well just not count. And people say, how you train legs? You don't count. You go full range of motion. This is all you got to do to train calves. Really, to get good calves, you got to not count reps. You got to go full range of motion. And you have to tolerate as much pain as you can humanly tolerate. Shake your calves off for 15, 20 seconds and go back at it again. And then you need to do that for about 10 years because that's how long it's going to take to get good calves. I laugh. When I started training in the 80s, calves mattered. And I had chicken legs. I broke my ass to get the calves I did. And when I finally got them, they didn't even matter anymore. Because in the 90s, you didn't have to have them anymore. Seriously. Tony Pearson couldn't win a show in the 80s. Not that he was going to win the Olympia, but he wasn't winning some shows because his calves were so bad. And then you come up with guys in the 90s that it's just so painfully obvious that they're imbalanced and it doesn't matter anymore. So I didn't mean to get off on the calf tangent, but the point being, it's two different rests. The circuit training versus, I don't think it's going to build muscle as much. If that's more the question, a circuit training type. Well, circuit training to me is using the muscle and burning more calories because it's kind of more non-stop, that sort of thing. There's a little bit more. Clearly, it's not just burning body fat because glycogen is still the fuel choice. You're still getting the pump, that sort of thing. But it's still more of it's less of a strength, less of a size. You ain't going to get huge that way. Now, that doesn't mean that you want to get huge. Don't get me wrong. If you want to be in great shape and you want to burn more calories and say you don't have a lot of time to do extra cardio, that's a great way to train. It's a great way to train.
Especially when you're thinking ahead at age 75, when you say, well, maybe I didn't want so much bulk after all.
Right, that could be too, yeah. But you can always just, like I said, you can go to a sandwich for a week and you can eat a lot of food and you'll be fine.
You say that like CrossFit type of training.
Yeah.
That's more basically on the strength. But usually when I see clients see that stuff and I see the person how they look, they're assuming it is automatically what I want to do more regular bench press, this and that, I want that. And the concept that they see is like, does that maybe the muscle or is it just a strength thing all around?
CrossFit is tough. Here's the thing. It's getting harder and harder for the average person to look at somebody and decide what they want and how to train because someone looks a certain way and they train a certain way doesn't mean that's how they got there. It's weird because I have bodybuilder guys I've competed against for years who are now CrossFitters and I have to give them a hard time, but they look great. I mean, the joke, it's kind of funny because they stay lean all the time. They stay in incredible condition all the time. They're actually winning. Oh, and if they're not winning, they're going top 3 in every competition they do because it's easier to go from a bodybuilder with the strength down to and gain the cardiovascular and the oxygen uptake than it is to go the other way and be that skinnier guy who has the running and has the cardio and then get the strength out of it. But it is hard because now there's so many divisions. I mean, you got men's physique, you got the CrossFit thing that is just, I don't know if it's blown up here, but it's blown up in the United States. Huge. And it's a good look. I mean, I look at it and go, dang, I don't know if I had a smaller waist like that, maybe I'd be down with that too. So it is. It's kind of appealing, you know. You get the bodybuilder, you start eating more food, your waist getting bigger. You got to wonder, I gained 4 inches on my chest and shoulders, but I gained 2.5 on my abs. You know, they may be muscular, but you're a little lockier from eating all that food. So it's, you know, sometimes it can be a catch there. You know, I think again, it just comes back to, do you know where that person that you see and you like their look, do you know where they came from? Was the training related to the progress they made? Maybe they're a CrossFitter because they look that way and it's that training appeals to them more and it fits how they look. You know, I don't mean to come at everything from the other side, but I like to shift to different
I'm
angles.
trying to say is like, I did a basic bodybuilding thing and I diet down, and I was like 256, and I come all the way down to like 200.
Okay.
And Rip and everybody's like, how you doing? How you doing? I mean, I have to make up a story how to do ops because I wasn't really doing it. It's basically dieting. And you know, they just see me do incline crunches and that's it. And they're like, oh, that's like the ops. What do you do? What do you need? All you do is cardio. But it's like trying to sell basic idea, basic training idea. Because a lot of bodybuilders do the most aggressive move. It doesn't fly, not with a visual thing. You know?
It doesn't fly from.
It doesn't fly like as convince somebody to just walk into the gym.
Gotcha.
Fly and say, okay, this is the right way to do it.
Right.
You know, they have to go around a long way.
Yeah.
Try everything and every little thing and do little things.
Sure.
These things here. And then, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and one of the things of being a trainer, and whether you're a nutritionist, you're a trainer, or whatever else, is you get this. They'll come in and they'll talk to you and be like, well, Johnny said, I heard the other day, Johnny said that he did this. Well, you ain't paying Johnny. If you're working with Johnny, then go talk to Johnny. You know, your clients also have to know, and you don't have control over this, and it can be kind of frustrating as a trainer. Your clients have to listen to you. They're paying you. You think they would listen to you, but they don't always do that. So it is. It can be tough. It can be frustrating, but number one rule is, I mean, you hand them the tools to go build a house, you don't know what the hell to do. You might go beat somebody over the head with it. You're not responsible for that. You know what I mean? You're trying to help them out. You're trying to get them to build, and you're handing them the tools, but you don't know what they're going to do. My client base is roughly 70% outside of the United States. I meet very few people. I mean, I worked with Shanique forever and finally just saw her face to face last night. I rarely meet the people that I work with. So they think that I have no idea that they've stuffed their face with cake and everything else, but yet when they come back to me for the week and they tell me what they have done, it's just right there. It doesn't say that because I've been doing it for so long I can see, and I have to ask them, what the hell have you been doing? Because this doesn't happen without you doing some version of this. This is like they think you're so far away that you just don't know. I'm not going to. And part of it is they're embarrassed. I get that. Okay, and you have to understand. I go over this with the training too. Whether you're a veteran or you're somebody starting out, it's not a game of being perfect. I mean, they won't tell you, but top competitors, and I'll tell them, and they have to tell you because I'll tell them. Bill was going through drive-thrus when he turned pro. He couldn't stay out of the McDonald's drive-thru because he was, you know, in a sense, over-dieting, that sort of thing. And he was learning the ropes. I mean, the guy was so good that he was advancing so fast that he wasn't able to really get the discipline right away of the dieting and everything else. And look, I say this, if the guy can turn pro going through McDonald's for a week, more power to you. You eat the hell out of them quarter pounders and cook it like that, turn pro. But everybody else hates on it for that reason. You know, because they've been working their butt off and they've been around for a while and they're not doing it. Almost everybody getting ready for a show will fall off and they'll lose it. They'll just lose it. So it's not about the perfection, it's about consistency. It's when you do fall off that you don't say, well, it's Tuesday, I'll start next Monday. It's Tuesday, dude. Get back on now. Jump back on. Get back on the plan and keep going. So it really does. It matters. I've got it's stories. I've got stories. But again, I mean, any other question with training?
Oh wait, somebody did something else?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's all about the house. What's your view or take on abs? Because like for me, I see progression. I've lost a lot of weight. I say arms, back, traps, but abs will not show.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure.
Well, first thing is it a body fat issue, or do you not have thickness in your abdominal wall from a muscular standpoint? Like, is it a weakness from just a muscle standpoint?
I think so. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then, and here's what a lot of people do, they treat abs like, I have to do crunches 15 and 20 reps, everything else. If that's a weak muscle, you gotta get it to grow. So you gotta hit it like you would with the same type of idea or ideology of hitting chest or hitting back. It has to be heavier. And I'm not telling you to do 6-8 reps. What I'm telling you is it's gotta be heavier. You've gotta have resistance there. What happens a lot of times is you're either born with a real pretty abdominal wall that's shaped real well, or you're not. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do anything with it, you can't thicken it up and everything else, but that's a very, genetics controls what your waistline looks like from a muscular standpoint quite a bit. And an example is I'm more of a Rich Gaspari, blocky ab. You know, I can get super thin skin and veins and everything else, but I'm still blocky through my midsection, where someone else may have more of that taper and it comes down real pretty, it's a small waist, that sort of thing. If it's, yeah, exactly, versus Rich. Never mind, he could never be Rich. Very blocky, but and then it becomes, then from there it's a body fat issue. I mean, you can probably get leaner, but again, I tell this to people all the time when they don't want to get big, they just want to come to me and they're like 160 pounds. This is no offense against anybody 160 pounds, but if you're 160 pounds and you're 5'8", 5'9", and you want to get ripped, you don't have muscle to get ripped. That's like trying to carve a turkey that there's just nothing there. You got to have meat to carve meat, or get detail, that sort of thing. So if it's an issue of thickness, then you just got to hit it. And the nice thing is abs recover relatively quickly. So you could probably hit them 2, maybe even 3 times a week and hit them pretty hard. Not with things that put your back at risk, like a sit-up or something like that, but weighted rope crunches. I don't know what kind of machines you have here, and I'm not a big machine guy, but when it comes to abs, if it can save your back, you want to find a couple solid machines to train abs. That's my opinion. I'm not anti-machine, but at the same time, I think not enough people pick up weight and set it down. And that's just, if there's one thing that has been proven over time, is you're going to get big if you have to pick up weight and put it down. Machines, they have their place, but you got to move real weight. In my opinion, you got to move real weight.
Oh, yeah. Well, you spoke about injuries earlier. The question is really more so like in terms of when you train, when you warm up, what type of things you apply to kind of help to, get your joints. Maybe I touched my shoulder right there because I play racket sports, I play basketball.
Okay.
So whenever I start working heavily on my shoulder, my shoulders, the front part is stronger than the back part.
Sure.
You're
going to answer your own question though right here, aren't you? As soon as you said front part is stronger than your back part, get your back part strong. There's the imbalance. And when you have injuries, a lot of times that's really what it is. In some way, there's an imbalance somewhere, and it's going to manifest. It's going to come out as an injury. It's the weak. It's going to give something. So first order of business really is then you have to wonder or ask yourself how much work are you doing front pressing and chest versus back, specifically high rows and things like that, middle, upper back. A lot of times you can even see when if people sit and they're kind of hunched forward, these muscles are tight and they're pulling everything forward. Now, you can have good posture, which you always want to try to stick your shoulders back, but you can catch, it's almost like the gut. If you don't control your gut and the thing comes out, then you got to wonder how strong your abs are too. So first order of business is just to take a look at your training, your back training versus your chest training. And most dudes, and I don't know that you do, most guys tend to favor the and they go more, they got to put the numbers up, they got to bench. I'm not a big fan. I don't think benching is great anyway, because I think it's number one injury. It's hard on the front shoulders, front delts, and not a lot of people truly bench correctly. But aside from that, if it's not that, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case, but that's the first order of business if you know you're already weak in the back. The other thing is what exactly the injury is. And I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on the internet. I always say that like I'm joking, but first, when push comes to shove, I am a bodybuilder who's been around for a long time, who specializes in nutrition and supplementation. There is no rehab in there. I don't pretend to be an expert in that area. The only reason, if you come to me and say, well, I've got a torn labrum, I'm like, oh, I've had to deal with that for 20 years. So there's a lot that I've had to deal with clients, and a lot I've had to deal with myself for training so long that I may be able to relate. But I don't know specifically, like I said, if it's a rotator cuff, I haven't had a lot of rotator cuff issues that I've had to deal with. And it's awful hard for me. I'm not dealing with clients one-on-one like you are. I'm dealing with them miles and miles away, and that's why I can do that, because I'm not, the training advice and consulting that I'm giving is quite secondary to the nutrition and supplementation aspect of it. They'll get the training from me, but they're coming to me for the nutrition and supplementation. And the gap in space, with them being somewhere, me being somewhere else, allows me to do that. The training, I tell my clients all the time, I can't diagnose what your situation is, and I'm like over the internet. So I tend to try not to give a whole lot of advice on that, if possible. And me giving you the advice of saying that you need to bring up the weak, but that's more from a bodybuilding perspective than it is a medical diagnosis or a rehab type thing. Can I ask though, what is the pain and how is it? It's one side, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because if it's both, then it might not necessarily.
No, it's the
When you're doing, what are you doing? Oh, it's only bothering you when you're playing sports or when you're training. Okay, so what are you doing specifically? Okay, Saturday.
Presses are fine.
Okay. And so here's what I would, and it sounds simple, and I don't mean it to, but anything that hurts, you don't do. I mean, that's, and again, that comes back to people thinking, well, but I have to do this because it's part of my shoulder routine, or I have to squat because it's part of my leg. You don't. Anything that hurts you, just, if you can work around it, work around it, especially with a multi-angle joint like your shoulder, which is nice because I've had torn cartilage forever, torn labrum in my shoulder. There are some days where I can do side laterals, but I have to lean into an inclined bench instead of stand up. So you can play with the angle too for your side laterals. A lot of times when people do side laterals, they tend to do this. So they're coming back and they're flipping, and a lot of that stress is transferring to the front part of the shoulder when we're all weaker from the back anyway. So if you're able to even stay in here and do your side lateral raises out this way, transferring, you're still working side delt, but it's actually moving that stress to the back part of the side delt instead of the front part of the side delt. Not only will you see your shoulders improve, but you may get around the pain completely. Because with that multi-angle joint, when you've got pain in there, or irritation, or it's a rotator cuff, or some type of itis, I'd call that, anything itis is old guy. Old guy, just heard it's overused, basically. You just use it so much, and then you ask him, when was the last time you took a day off? I don't know, maybe when I was 23, I trained all the time. Well, that's real hardcore of you, but you sometimes need to take that time because you just beat your body up and you get to the point where you've got a couple aches and pains. A few days, a handful of days, even a week can make all the difference in the world. Come back and at least you can, I like to say my joints hurt all the time, except for that first week. When I come back after I've taken a week off, I feel like a million bucks. And then it's back the second week to the same old crap. Everything hurts again. So, I mean, you really go with that and just play with that angle a little bit. I was thinking maybe you would say that it was a press behind your neck or something, some poor biomechanical, like why would you press behind that? But that's a personal choice. I don't believe anything goes behind your neck ever. The next time you go to put a box on a shelf and you do it this way, then you can go back to your presence behind your neck. And that usually stops it right there. Or I tell people, if you're gonna pull yourself up to look over something, and you're gonna pull it up behind your neck, like you do in a lap pull, then you do lap pulls behind your head. Point being, it's not a natural movement. So, yeah, not to be doing does anybody, you guys drink, bathroom, break for a minute? I mean, I can talk forever. I can keep going. I mean, if you guys want to break for a few minutes, keep going. I don't know.
Maybe a lot of people
got
want
somewhere
to hear.
to go.
Maybe people want to hear you.
Me, I'll write.
Nutrition.
Hey, I'll keep up.
That's, I think,
This one's actually easy, cardio. It sucks. It's a giant waste of time, and that's not a waste of time. You should do it to be healthier, to get lean. But it's incredibly boring. You go nowhere. Maybe here, maybe in Jamaica. I live in Colorado, so I live just outside of Denver and mountains. So for me to go outside at a higher elevation, it is pretty. But I'm not enjoying cardio. I don't know about you. Cardio just plain sucks. So my advice for cardio, even if it doesn't suck and you just love cardio and you really like it because you're just a little off, that's off. That's off, man.
Yeah, off too.
Oh my goodness, two of them. Get together and train together. Even if you do like it, you know, we have so much time in a day. You got, you know, I'm sure y'all got jobs, you got kids and stuff you would probably rather be doing. So again, it comes back to efficiency, and I use that word a lot. With training, efficiency, you don't want to be doing anything that you're wasting time on. Cardio is the same way. And my philosophy on cardio is very, very simple. Use it as a tool to keep your metabolism running hot, you know, your body burning more calories, but don't let your body rely on it. If you don't compete, you know someone who has or who's lost a ton of weight and they are doing 2 hours of cardio a day and they're dying and they're probably not getting any further with 2 hours a day as they were even with 1 hour a day, but that's a whole other discussion. Again, it's efficiency. Put the cardio in, take it out. You've heard of carb cycling, calorie cycling. Your body will adapt if you eat the same amount of calories and, you know, carbs and things like that. Your body will adapt to the same amount of cardio as well. So you got to kind of keep it off balance. My advice, if you're saying, well, what do you mean? How would I know when to put it and take it out? Start the week with your cardio, set for how many ever sessions that week. But if you're progressing well that week and your weight is falling like you want to, then cut a couple sessions out at the end of the week. You're not going to all of a sudden stop burning fat or stop losing weight. It's a cumulative type thing. I've had people when, you know, especially during the show, I'll cut their cardio sometimes 7 to 10 days out, and they freak like I still have body fat to lose. I want to lose body fat. You know, you don't just stop burning body fat the day that you stop doing cardio. What I've done is I've had a lot of time invested in the game to where I've done, and I've been very organized with trial and error, made a lot of notes, and I'm a guinea pig on myself. So if something does end up working for me, then I have clients who want to try it, and then it starts to, you have a bigger amount of people that are doing it, and you can see whether it's effective. And in my opinion, you know, look, the guy with the PhD is always going to say that guys with PhDs are way smarter than people without. Maybe, but I would take, and again, maybe it's because I don't have one and I have the trial and error and the experience, I would always want to go with someone who had seen it happen, tried it, done it a million different ways, and come to a conclusion that way. That's just me. What you guys want is entirely up to you. That's what I want. So then what I do is I just surround myself with other people who have PhDs, and then it's the best of both worlds.
Sir, what you just talked about a while ago, that is basically a research on your own. What you're trial and error?
My trial and error?
Yeah, that's a research on your own.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
You
Yeah,
understand?
I just want to
got
get
it.
credit for it. I don't have any paper on the wall that says, damn, you're smart.
Yeah, not because of a job license, means they can't drive the car.
Fair enough, okay, I appreciate that.
And most of the time, the PhD guys have never lived this in their life.
Right.
So how you gonna tell me?
What you need is you need someone who has both, and you don't usually find it.
Yeah, yeah. So,
No, that's cool. It's what it is even though I've been here for a week, I'm better than I was. My wife picks on me because she has to translate for me. Like I stand there like, whoa. Like I don't get the accent. It's cool. It is cool. I tried it too. I take all the H's out and I sound stupid. Like every ting, and my wife's looking at me like, what the hell are you trying to do? Anyway, it is very cool, but it's taking me a week to figure it out. Again, I just got cardio and I can get into nutrition. The cardio just doesn't take a whole lot of time when you talk about for that reason. I don't want to give it any more importance or any more significance than I feel that it needs. Put it in, take it out, just like you would up your calories, change your calories, keep your body off balance. Body always has to be off balance. I mean, anytime your body can get used to what it's doing, it's just going to sit there. It likes to sit there. It likes to not do anything. Body doesn't want a lot of muscle. It doesn't. It doesn't want a whole lot of body fat. You got to really work to get used, and you know too. You got to work to put on some body fat. That's why people go, you know what, this is not happening fast enough. Well, you put it on over 5 to 10 years and you expect it to be off in 5 weeks. That really isn't how the game works. So you got to work equally as hard to get it off as you did put it on this to get it off. And I say that being like, I'm not picking on anybody, but I did that this week. Crates all over my face. Nutrition supplement skip loading. This one is, this one I could talk forever. This always takes a while. Nutrition is my thing. And I separated them because basic nutrition with your high protein, I mean, there's just, everybody's known for something, I guess. Dave Palumbo is a keto guy. Chris Aceto is a high carb guy. I'm not known for that. I'm known for eating a lot of pancakes and Pop-Tarts and the high carb skip loading. So I think I just got you, and you opened your eyes a little bit right there. What's this guy? I have battled for the reasons, because of the way that my dieting is relatively unorthodox. I've battled with a lot of critics over the years because it seems at first to be very, very much like a fad type of diet. When you say, oh, I can get you ready for a show eating Pop-Tarts and pancakes, you know, that's a line you would see like on an infomercial or on Oprah or something, I don't know. So it's not, and that's a little misleading anyway because you don't eat that stuff every day. And you know, I don't know what you guys know as far as the other things that are out there, the novel approaches out there now with if it fits your macros and what is that? Yeah, just put a bunch of letters with it and all of a sudden it's important stuff, yeah. What was the other one? Fasting, what was it? Intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting. Yeah, so you got IF, you got IIF, OPP, OU812, I don't know, there's so many of them I can't keep track of. But part of the reason for that is because the market with nutritionists is saturated anyway, and they know, they're smart enough to know nobody's going to pay attention to me unless I come out with something ridiculous. And you can only really, I mean, there's only so much you can do. And then fingers have been pointed at me and said, well, wait a minute, you can't be too critical because you have your protocol that seems, you know, was quite unorthodox. Mine is, but mine is logical and has been proven over thousands of clients over 10, 12 years. So I always say, look, I'm not here to sell anybody on anything. I just put the information out there. You guys decide if it's something that you're interested in doing, or if you think it's nuts and it doesn't work, I'm fine either way. I'm gonna step on stage the next time I get up there with no skin, and so are my clients. It's not something that I just don't spend time beating it down people, and I don't do it on the internet either. People make up their own minds, they come to their own conclusions. That's a whole better way to present your ideas, and if they're on board, they're on board. The other part is if someone comes to work with me and they're not on board, or they're not sure, but I need to prove it to them, I don't like that either. You either know how good I am, you understand my reputation, and that's why you came to me, or you don't. You can work with somebody else, I'm cool with that, But it's a trust issue too, much like we were saying with trainers. If you trust that the guy you're working with and paying money to knows what he's talking about, you shouldn't be listening to anybody else either, and you should be completely on board with doing what he's doing. You're like the only white guy in here. He's like, the only white dude. Okay. That's funny. And the reason that I bring up about the high carb, low carb, high fat, everybody's got their little niche and their thing they're known for. I don't do that. My method, I do have the skip loading, which is high carbs on the weekend, and this is the analogy or the metaphor or the little story that I use. Burning body fat over weeks is kind of like you have this fire that you need to keep going for, say, 12 weeks. You got this big old pile of wood, your body fat. I'm going to help you. I'm going to explain my metaphor as we go. I know. So what you do is you start off this little fire and you put, some wood on there, but you got to keep it going every day. It can't burn out because you got to get through all this wood. I mean, essentially, the competition is get through this pile of wood, which is, like I said, body fat. You got to get rid of all this body fat. The only way to do that is to dump it on the fire. So you dump it on the fire, but throughout the course of the week, that fire is going to burn down. It's going to start to come down. You're going to have embers. You're going to be like, oh, okay, it's still burning. Metabolism. You feel me? Work with me. And you come along on Sundays and you just pour a bunch of gasoline on that thing. And then you can throw more fire on there. And then as that week progresses, it comes down. It's coming down again. It's slowing down. You got embers. And you throw gas on it. The gas is essentially carbohydrates, refined, fast-acting carbohydrates, okay? Once a week, on the weekend. So the diet throughout the week is just a lot like any other diet would be. Is it low carb, is it high carb, is it high, I don't know anybody's individual situation, and it is individual. Some people can take in 400 calories or 400 grams of carbs a day and get really, really lean. My ass can't take in any carbs during the day for the week, or I won't get lean. So that might be the difference, say, between you and I. I'm 43. When I was 25, I could do that. But now, not only am I older, but I also don't move a whole lot because I work from home. So my idea of cardio is like going to the post office. Because I just don't go anywhere. Or the supermarket, that sort of thing. Which is another point that I need to make about cardio too before I forget. And that is, coming back to everybody has different variables. 30 minutes of cardio to me is huge because I don't move that much. But 30 minutes of cardio to a trainer who might be walking around all day for 12 hours, or an ER nurse, and I don't know why I'm using my buddy Kenneth Banks. There's a little shout out to Kenneth. He just got done doing a show, dropped 80 or 90 pounds, is an ER nurse. You know what I'm talking about, Shanique? Okay. And he's an ER nurse and works like 12-hour shifts. So 30 minutes of cardio to him won't impact him anywhere near what it will impact someone who doesn't move like I do. So those things have to be taken into consideration too, not only if you're trying to fix your own cardio, but if you're putting together cardio for a client, a lot of times that's overlooked. 30 minutes to one person is not 30 minutes to the other person. Anyway, and ideally you let the diet do the work. Let the diet do most of the work and let the cardio do as little work as possible. Anyway, coming back to the diet, like I say, during the week, everybody's going to be a little bit different. You got to take into consideration, how you respond to carbohydrates, whether your activity level is high, how much you train. Look, high volume training you can take in more carbs, you're gonna need more carbs. Lower volume training, high intensity like a DC or a Dorian Yates, high intensity tech, you're not gonna need as many carbohydrates, you're not gonna need as many calories, you're not training as frequently. And you're not as high volume, you're not depleting muscle. When you deplete a muscle, and some of you may know this, but for those who don't, when you work a muscle for a while with weight training, you're depleting it of glycogen, which is essentially stored carbohydrate. You're going to burn more body fat when those muscles are depleted of glycogen. But they also don't look as good either. Like this. Well, actually, I'm probably kind of full right now. But nonetheless, they get flat. And a flat, I say flat and fat are only one letter off. Fat, if a muscle's flat now pushing against your skin, and this is even for competitors too, that's why it's so important that you're not flat when you get ready for, or when you're going on stage for a show, because if you are, that skin isn't going to be tight over the top of that muscle, and it's going to look completely different. And you will look soft, and you will look kind of fat. Maybe not fat isn't, I guess, the best word, but you're going to look soft. So from a bodybuilding standpoint, or anybody here who's looking to get into better shape, that would be to us that you were maybe fatter than you wanted to be, or you're carrying a few extra pounds of body fat that you didn't want. So going through the week, you got to figure out where your calories need to be, where your macros need to be, and that is a very complicated, it's complicated for me to tell you. I would almost have to look at what you're doing and that sort of thing. But you never want to eliminate, in my opinion, any one macro. You still need them all. Now, maybe your carbs are coming from vegetables, because mine have to come from vegetables. I can't take in a lot of starchy carbs, and a lot of people are like that. They may even metabolically be able to handle those calories, but they can't digest them very well. Get all distended, get all gassy, and I'm serious when I say it, because if you eat enough oatmeal and all of a sudden you're gassy and you think it's funny, because guys think it's funny, I think it's funny, and I'm 43 years old. I'm just immature like that. But the point is your body isn't digesting or processing that food very well, then you need to change it out. And carbs are like that. Protein isn't usually like that. Good healthy fats aren't usually like that. Usually when you have some kind of a problem with digestion, it's almost always carbohydrate related. Then you can get into gluten and all that kind of mess too. I try not to come at my nutrition when I'm talking to people from those types, because there's just so many different things that you could be intolerant to or have allergies to that, I mean, it's almost not worth me discussing, because if you are having, this is what I always say, if you're having issues and you can't figure out what it is, start eliminating foods one at a time, because if you eliminate 3 or 4 at a time and make too many changes, you're not going to know what's wrong. You may get rid of the problem, but you may not know exactly what it is. And talk to your doctor. Again, I'm a nutritionist. I work with athletes and people who want to get into shape. I do not claim the health end of it at all. I can't. My conscience won't allow me to do it. I say you're healthier, leaner, and you're healthier doing what I'm telling you to do, in the sense that if you're going to get leaner and you're going to get into better shape, yeah, you're healthier. But that's as far as I'm willing to take it. I got a conscience, so I'm not a doctor, and I don't blame it on you. Throughout the course of the week, though, you would go through, with my dieting protocol, you would go through dieting. You would lose, the goal is to lose 1 to 2 pounds throughout the week with the restricted, lower calories. Still shouldn't be starving, but that's a balance issue. You got to be taking in as many calories as you can take in to lose weight.
Say that again? Say that again?
You need to take in and it's really important. You need to take in as many calories as you can take in to lose weight.
Everybody needs to take that. You just want to
Yeah, well, and it's real easy to, it's real easy to lose weight if you just cut your calories and all of a sudden, I lost 4 pounds, and you're not taking in. But what you're doing is it isn't a weekly process. Like, you need to not only be focused on this week, but it's long term. So what happens is if you cut your calories too low, you're going, for only a week or 2, you're going to lose that weight initially, and then you're going to have nowhere to go. And I refer to it in my DVD that I did a couple years ago as the ceiling in the basement. And when I say someone is at the ceiling or closer to the ceiling, then that means you've got a lot of options before you start running out of them and you hit the basement. If I say you're in the basement, you're running out of options. When I say you're running out of options during the diet, what will bring that ceiling down is increasing cardio, so you're burning more calories, which is doing more work, cutting calories from your diet, and as you do these things over the course of the week, look, if you've added a ton of cardio and you've cut your calories and it's only 5 weeks into what is essentially a 12 or 20 week diet, and you're already closing in and you're getting close to the basement, what are your options when you stop progressing? You don't have many options. You keep the ceiling high by losing as much weight as you can on limited amount of cardio, high amount of calories, the highest amount of calories you can take and still lose weight. That's actually feeding your metabolism anyway. It's essentially what we're talking about. You're keeping that fire burning by putting more wood on. Gas is what I was talking about, and I'll get to that in a minute, which is really just kind of piling on carbs on the weekend to keep the metabolism real strong. So again, going through the week, taking as many calories as you can, shooting for it. And it depends on, look, if you're way overweight, you said you lost, what, 60 pounds or something like that? What was that, 50?
54.
Okay, 54. So when you started out, if you were losing 3, 4, 5 pounds a week for a couple weeks, that would be okay. You probably couldn't sustain that without losing it too quickly after 3 or 4 weeks. But initially you could, because you have a lot of weight to lose. There's nothing nothing that bothers me more than when I see a trainer or someone who worked with someone, they're 300 pounds, and they're telling them, no, you lost 3 pounds this week, we got to back off to only 1 or 2. The cat weighs 300 pounds, give him a break, he can lose weight faster than that. You know, when you're talking about 1 or 2 pounds, you're talking someone who's only overweight 25 pounds. I mean, I just throw that number out there. There's, everybody's different. But then you're losing 1 or 2 pounds, you don't want to sacrifice muscle tissue, okay, that's cool. But even then, if you're going to lose 3 or 4 pounds for a couple weeks and then it backs off to a couple, then that's great, that's fine. If you're going to sustain that at 3 or 4 or even 5 pounds, then you're probably losing too much weight. And then you would have to look at it and go, you don't just look at how much weight you're losing, you also are looking at things like strength. Am I holding my strength in the gym? Because that's a huge indicator of whether you're hanging on to muscle tissue. And as I said before, if you're holding your strength, you're almost certainly not losing muscle tissue. You just can't hold strength and lose muscle tissue. It just doesn't work. Yeah.
Where do you get all that extra calories from? Like, you lose, like, let's say, good calories instead of bad calories, or you get from
For the skip loading or during the week? Skip loading?
Yeah,
Okay.
skip loading. Right?
That's where I'm going. Yeah, and that's where I'm going. During the week, everything's clean. Everything is, and when I say clean, I always say, look, if you can get it out of the ground, you're in pretty good shape. Quality proteins, some good fats. I don't think anybody needs to take any more carbohydrates, even if they're clean, any more carbohydrates than they really need to stay a little full, and when I say full, muscle full, and to provide the energy that they need to get through their workouts. I think anything above that is, it's kind of wasteful. I just don't think you need it. If you still need to make up calories, good fats will satiate, they'll keep you more satisfied, and carbohydrate will. They hang around longer, and that's a leptin issue as well. And I don't even like to discuss leptin because I don't think they've made, anybody familiar, have you heard the word leptin? They use it a lot with supplements now because it's a new catchphrase that everybody equates to, ooh, leptin has to do with fat burning. But they don't, in my opinion, they just don't know very much about it yet anyway. They know that, yes, the fat cell signals the brain and all that, but everybody, they've already shown that they don't really understand the signaling and what it's telling the brain. So, I mean, I think there's still a lot more research there, so I try to leave it alone as much as I can. Partly because I think people get caught up in those words and those catchphrases, and I don't think it matters. Coming around to this guy's question here with the skip loading. The skip loading is basically when we get to the weekend and we're talking about pouring gas on the fire to bump your fat burning furnace up for the following week. You're going to dump refined low fat carbohydrates on there, and this is where it gets, oh my goodness, how can I do that? And those refined low-fat carbohydrates are, I mean, as an example, from, you know, pancakes or bread or white rice or granola. And I'm trying to, you know, I'm in the United States, so I'm trying to make sure too, because we're here in Jamaica, that you guys have the same food. Sometimes I'm dealing with.
We have one that Paul consumes. It's called Trelawney yellow yam.
Okay.
That's natural. That's all natural.
That's what we call food.
Okay. So you want to go with the process. And it's usually the first question I get is why the process. Process is very, very fast. When it's low fat and it's highly processed where there's no fiber, that carbohydrate hits your system, hits your bloodstream very quickly. Okay. When it hits your system quickly, when you're depleted, it gets stored very quickly as well, because then it becomes an insulin game and insulin sensitivity and things like that. Basically, to make it simple, when you're depleted, and when your muscles are depleted, your body will store carbohydrate very, very quickly and very, very efficiently. So it also, it's twofold. Not only will it store it efficiently, but it also, when you get a lot of those calories in there, it affects your metabolism so much by amping. I mean, you'll get warm. I don't know if you've been dieting and you eat a big meal, maybe you just cheat, like, I gotta have something. And all of a sudden you get all warm, you're sweaty, you're like, damn, what is going on? Your temperature is kicking up because your metabolism is responding to the food, pouring gas on the fire. So it's getting hotter. When you do that, and I say a Sunday, it can be any day. It just tends to work for my clients better and it worked for me better to do it on Saturday or Sunday because you're not working. You tend to have more downtime on the weekend. Because sometimes you may start off a diet and only have 2 or 3 hours, a 2 or 3 hour window of eating these carbs or skip loading. But it may go to the point where, especially if you're doing a show, which is the extreme end of it, you may be loading for 16 hours from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed. And it becomes, I don't want to say force feeding, but you got to be eating. If you have any room in your stomach, you're hungry, you got to eat. And that's where it becomes, everybody thinks, oh, that sounds awesome, I get to eat. It's about awesome for half of the first meal of the day. Then after that, you're like, oh my God, this is terrible. I don't want to eat. I remember my wife, I don't want to eat anymore. You will eat more pancakes. And you will get lean. She got to the point where she'd rather be dieting another 6 days. But the point is, when you come back to the dieting the next day, or the following, the next day and then into the next week, what you've done essentially is you pour all those calories on there. Again, it's like pouring gas on fire. Now you've got this raging fire, and you're back to your regular diet. And you're burning more body fat that following week. I've worked with so many people with this over the course of 10, 12 years, myself included, with the contests I've done from 2002 until, I just competed last year, about a year ago. And sometimes the skip load itself will keep you from it'll keep you progressing and losing body fat week to week. I've gone 2 months without changing anything else in the diet at all, except the skip load. So it's pretty funny sometimes. And I've even gone through preps, entire preps, and we look back and went, wow, we never made a diet change. That's the exception to the rule, but it does happen. Small percentage of the time. So the point is that trying to show the impact that metabolic reset every week has. Some diets will advocate for a cheat meal. And it's along the same, it's the same idea or the same concept. My argument is a cheat meal doesn't provide enough calories to truly pour. It's like, I don't know, you take shot glass and you pour gas on it. Ooh, that's not going to do a whole lot. So, the guys who talk about Dave Colombo and stuff, he is a nutritionist as well, and he advocates for cheat meals. But I've had a lot of people come to me over the years and work with me who had worked on his type of dieting prior, and they knew that there just wasn't enough food. They weren't getting a metabolic response out of that one meal. And then in the course of a couple weeks, I've got a meeting anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day on this Saturday or Sunday with carbs, and then they're progressing again, and they're getting leaner. And when I say lean, I'm talking like gross lean. Like you don't have skin and like you. Yeah, that's when a dude goes, oh, because dudes are weird like that. But I also work with the other, and I get this question a lot, is whether it is just something for guys, the diet, and it's not. There is no difference when you get into metabolism and dieting. There are subtle differences with hormones, but it's not enough to change. Men and women don't eat different foods. They may eat different calories. You may have, one person may have a longer schedule and be taking in more calories during the week than someone else. But I've had 120-pound bigger girls eat all day on Sunday for 16 hours, and dudes who can only do 6 or 8 hours. So it's pretty individual. And again, it comes back to things like we were talking about before. What does that person do during the day for a job, and are they on their feet all the time? Are they younger? Hormonally, what's the difference? From a hormone standpoint, there are variables in there. There are other factors that make everybody and everybody's approach individual. Concepts, though, principles remain the same. Young, old, male, female, competitor, non-competitor. You don't have to be a competitor to use it either. I've even used the protocol of people who don't even weight train, and they've done very well too. So in 4 or 5 years, it'll probably be on Dr. Oz, and he'll be taking credit for it. And because he's got doctor before his name, he's got a TV audience. What do you do? Yeah.
I'm trying to understand this keep loading. So what is it that during the week you have low carb or no carb?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be no carb or low carb, but again, it's relative when you say low carb. I mean, you have to be in a caloric deficit so that you are losing weight, burning body fat, essentially. So where do you put those carbs is an individual thing. I just say that the carbs need to be...
So during the week you need that deficit?
Yes, you do need the deficit.
On the weekend you know.
Yeah, on the weekend, then you'll have that time frame where you're loading those carbohydrates. And like I said, when you first start, so as you get leaner and more depleted over time, that time will increase to the point where you're eating a lot more calories and a lot more carbohydrates. There's actually, and we don't have the time, there are things that are coming up that I'm looking into that I've heard from. I have a client, doctor, chiropractor, who comes in town regularly and trains with me, and we were talking one night about it, and I said, Rich, it's kind of like the body, we assume that every calorie we take in is used, and it's a consumed calorie that counts. But I told him, I said, there's almost like there's a point where you're taking in so many carbs and so many calories that it's almost not fully digested, that you're not using all of those calories. And he rattled off a word or a term, and I'm like, he said that's what it is. I'm like, what? He said there's a term for it, and he rattled off the term, and the life of me can't remember the term. I keep saying I'm going to go back and ask him. What we're looking at now, when I say me, is, and I don't want to get into the specifics of it too much because it's very early, but we're going to do some analysis to find out whether, matter of factly, from a scientific standpoint, whether there is actually nutrients that are passing through that really just aren't digested. Because what you run into is when someone is really lean and I say before a show, and I understand that everybody doesn't diet for a show. The reason I use that as an example is because it's so extreme. If you can diet for a show and something works for that type of extreme conditioning, it pretty much will work for everybody, because anything else is backing off from that extreme. Okay, so the only thing it really changes for us are people who really don't weight train. It can still work, but it has to be changed a little bit, because when you don't weight train, you're not depleting your body of glycogen and the carbohydrates. So your body it doesn't want to suck those carbohydrates. Here's an example. Adult onset diabetes is from eating primarily processed carbohydrates that your body doesn't need. then you have high circulating blood sugar levels. You have nowhere to store the carbohydrate because you don't have depleted muscles from working out and training them. So then you end up with high body fat, obesity. You end up with essentially being diabetic. That's the type of diet. So that's why I get a lot of people who say, oh, that's unhealthy. It's only unhealthy if you are not depleted and you're an average person. If you're an average person and you eat like that, never mind that you're only eating like that once a day for a certain amount of time, or I'm sorry, not once a day, but once a week, where people who are obese and diabetic do that every day for every meal, pretty much, and they have caused that damage over years and years. But the point is they're not training. They're not an athlete who has caused this situation in their body where they're able to suck those calories up and actually benefit from those calories. That's why carbohydrate gets such a bad rap, really, because carbohydrate itself really isn't bad. It's a timing issue. Even with the clients during the week, and myself included, when you get done training, even though you're eating clean during the week and it's not a skip level, you're still taking in, for that one meal, you're taking in 30, 40, 50 grams of carbs to replenish after you train, and it's a simple carb. It could be kids cereal. Kids cereal is a favorite of mine because it's so easy, practical, and it's so convenient, and it solves the problem of getting those simple processed carbs in there after you work out, and then it's back to the diet again. So there's, like I said, it's important to me to bring up the critical comments about it being unhealthy so that I can explain why it's not in a situation of a depleted athlete. It's important to me because that's like the number one thing that gets thrown. You know what gets thrown at me? It's never anybody who's concerned about health. It's always another nutritionist. Their idea is so much better. I mean, it's just a constant competition.
Do they have to be like processed, or can it be like fruits? That seems to be
Right. It can be fruits. It can be it can be sweet potatoes. It can be rice and that sort of thing. The thing is with that is it doesn't work as well. What I try to say is combine them so that you get a combination. What some people will do is they'll think, oh well, I could go just eat like low-fat donuts and stuff. And it's like, no, look. You got to balance it between, yes, the process, but you want to still get nutrition. Like as an example, make a cold cereal is a good example, but make make spaghetti, with a meat sauce or a marinara sauce that's relatively low fat, or make a homemade low fat pizza with healthier toppings. It doesn't have to be all. Like, I don't like it when people say, well, I was drinking full flavor soda. Well, then we want to keep it food so that your brain and your stomach are still connected in saying whether you're hungry or not. If you drink your calories, you can drink a lot of sugar calories before, even if you're full, before your body says, okay, now I've had enough. You need to go on by hunger because, and hunger is dismissed a lot when it comes to dieting. Because you're supposed to ignore it and just deal with it, and hunger doesn't have anything. Hunger has everything to do with it. Hunger tells you whether you're deficient or you're, like when you crave something, you're always going to crave what you're not eating. If you take your carbohydrate source and you make it all fruit, all of a sudden you're going to have this weird craving for noodles. I mean, it's a bizarre thing. When you eliminate something like it, you'll crave it. Take a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, you're going to crave peanut butter or avocado, and it's going to drive you nuts. It's just how the body works. So ideally, throughout the week, you shouldn't be ravenously hungry anyway. You should know you're dieting, but you shouldn't be like, I just want to eat my arm off. If no one was here and I had a third arm, I would just do it. You should have the energy to get through. Yes, you're working hard. Yes, you're losing body fat. You're not going to feel like you just ate cake. But then by the time you get to your Sunday, you feel you're depleted, that hunger is there, and you eat base. And this is what I tell people, they freak, because everybody wants black and white. They want to know how much, just tell me how much and I'll do it, Skip. Well, it's not that simple. Your hunger will dictate how much carbohydrate you eat. When you're no longer hungry, then you stop. When you get hungry again, then you eat it again. You eat carbs again during that time. Hunger dictates how depleted. The more depleted you are, and the leaner you get, the more hungry you're going to be. They say we weren't meant to have no to look like we have such and have such low body fat levels. It really kind of goes against the body's ability. It's almost like a survival mechanism, and that's why we don't force. You don't force yourself lean. You need to coerce it and manipulate your body into getting lean like that. Because you try to force your body to do anything, your body ain't gonna do it.
I'm still trying to understand I guess the carb, because I carb cycle, so I'll have high carbs on my heavy days.
Okay, you said your carb.
Cycle. I do carb cycle.
Oh, okay, carb. What's the second? I'm sorry.
Cycling.
Carb cycle.
Cycling. I'm sorry. For some reason, I couldn't get that.
Right. As people. So what I'm trying to understand with the skip loading, is it that it's on the assumption on the days that you're not working out, you have been eating these refined carbs or high carbs?
Well,
what I tend to do with carb cycling is the days I'm not working out, I will eat no carbs or low carbs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's some. Okay, well,
so I'm
technically it is carb cycling if you think, because you are, relatively low and then you bump up for that one day. I don't like to call it carb cycling because I think that the traditional way to carb cycle is incredibly complicated, or more, I don't want to say incredibly complicated, that's not fair. It's more complicated than it needs to be. And not everybody does it the same way, but you get into low, medium, and high days, and it's like, what day is it? What do I have to eat today? It's easy to cross numbers and that sort of thing. There will be a different carbohydrate, there usually is a different carbohydrate intake on a non-training day, on a non-weight training day, simply because, again, it comes back to the premise of you don't want to take in, or you don't need to take in any more carbohydrate than you really need to train and feel relatively full. So on the days that you would weight train, you would tend to take in a little bit more carbohydrate than you would on a non-training day. Sometimes it can be completely no carbs. It just depends on that individual and how you function. The reason I kept asking you what you said, one was because I didn't hear you, but I thought you were saying carb sensitive. And I was ready to pounce on that one. Just because carb sensitive, when people say they're carb sensitive, it's usually a very overused. It's almost like, well, I have higher levels of body fat, and so when I eat carbs, it just makes me fat. Well, no, not necessarily. More people think they're carb sensitive, a lot more think they're carb sensitive than they truly are. It's usually, I would say, no, you're calorie sensitive. If you eat too many calories, your ass will be fat, just like me. But I do know too, there are exceptions. I mean, the older I get, I can't function very well with starchy carbs. I just don't do well. I suppose I could keep starchy carbs in there and cut my protein intake, but I don't want to do that. And I certainly don't want to, because I figured out individually for myself, I don't do well on low amounts of fat either. Fat helps to satiate. It makes me feel that I'm not as hungry, much more so than a carbohydrate. And it does that for most people too. So there are exceptions, but.
What happens if you want to maintain a low body percentage, but you want to stay lean?
See, I like that because that's usually how I am. Yeah. It's the same thing. What you do, what you do is, and I didn't touch on the term, but the morning of or the weekend of, what you do is you track your weight during the week. Let's say you start off the week at 200 pounds, you go through the week, and when you get to the weekend, the morning of your skip load, you're at 198. You go, okay, cool, I lost 2 pounds this week, sweet, and let's say you're working with me and I set it up and I said, hey, we're gonna do a 5-hour skip load today. You do your 5 hours and you go back to your regular diet for the rest of the day. And then as we get into this next week, what we're watching for is a baseline weight. And I say baseline because I'll always say, my clients know what's your baseline. They'll be like, oh, I hit baseline today. Baseline just means when you get back to that weight of 198, because what happens when you take in carbs, you always gain weight. Okay, you don't gain body fat, you gain water weight, because carbohydrate combines with water when it's stored away as glycogen. But you also sometimes you even puff up a little bit because you'll hold a little bit of water. Your body's not used to taking in that higher amount of carbohydrate. But after 2 to 3 days, that water shifts, you drop it, and then you get back to, let's say you go up to, 205 from 198. I mean, that's a 204, 205. And then, women freak, like, oh my God, you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing. Well, they don't usually say that. But my wife does. And, the guys, they don't care because they're a little bigger, so they feel, wow. You tend to be stronger, too, for the couple days after you load. A lot of times it's the water, it's the leverage. You get a little bit better pump, and it's a good deal. So, coming back to what we were talking about earlier about the priority of the training, when you are skip loading, you want those weak muscle groups to be trained earlier in the week because you're going to have more energy. Then you put those stronger ones at the end. I think it was you who had those stronger muscle groups at the end of the week where you are going to be a little bit more run down later in the week as your weight starts to fall off and you're running on lower carbohydrate or lower calories. So as you get into the week, that water starts to fall off, and it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday type thing where you're going to baseline. 90% of people are going to baseline in that area. Okay. Once you hit the baseline, it's important because what that baseline says is when you hit it and then how much you are able to drop below that before the next load comes around on the weekend is how you're able to gauge whether the length of the skip load is long enough. Here's an example. Let's say you just baseline, you get back to your regular weight Tuesday morning, and then you drop 3 more pounds before Friday. Clearly to me, because I've done it for a long time, your skip load it's too small. It can go higher. And again, when I was saying earlier, this all comes back to taking as many calories as you can. You want that load to be as big as possible. You just can't jump that load to be huge to begin with because you have to build into it incrementally. Now, you may want to build into it fast. If you keep baselining early in the week like that, you're going to build into it quicker. Some people won't baseline until Friday, Saturday, even the morning of, they'll drop a pound below baseline on Sunday morning. And they're like, well, everybody else baselines on Wednesday. This is messed up. Look, as long as you're dropping below baseline, you're getting lean. Now, if you're forcing your water out or you're doing something else, that's different. But all things being equal, if you're just losing and you're dropping by Saturday and Sunday, oh well, I would say you're okay, you're in the minority, but oh well, you're getting leaner, and that's all that really matters. So that's how, again, you'll try to gauge how long that load needs to be based on when you baseline. Did that? Yeah, okay. Okay, I want to make sure, because what will happen is I'm going to answer it, and I'll get off on this tangent over here, and I'll never get back to this tangent.
I honestly have to say, because just to maintain that same low throughout the year, which is kind of like funny because right now I'm injured and I'm eating the same way and I'm just watching every line goes away,
right.
Every pain goes away. But
well, if you're not able to train, that's
not different.
Okay, yeah.
Can't even touch it.
Exactly, that's a bigger difference.
No, it's not. Not eating.
Right.
You can't do any training as far as just doing cardio. That one.
Yeah, if you're training and you just want to maintain the same look and you're at a leanness level that you want to be, then really you should have a load on the weekend that is big enough to where you still, provided your diet is tight and it's consistent throughout the week. Yeah, you just always baseline in that middle of the week. And if you don't, you start to baseline later in the week after a couple, then okay, maybe I'm not, maybe the load is a little big, and then you would trim it back. Look, anything, no matter what you do, the training, the diet, supplementation, everything really is a constant, it's constantly being fine-tuned. Because even if it works for 3 or 4 weeks, it may not, there's no saying that it's going to continue to work. So you have to constantly evaluate, hey, and sometimes the most subtle change can keep things going.
So you say that the same thing for like supplements, like for seeing protein shake, seeing the same thing. Because every time I go to buy like a supplement, there's always something new with the same brand that I'm always used to. I'm like, what the hell? And I find that manufacturers don't maintain the same. They always add something, they change the label and add this and try this instead and use it. So we find
You need a new manufacturer.
No, I'm serious. No, I'm serious.
I see what you're saying.
The only one I see that maintain the same thing is actually Twin Labs products.
Okay.
They're always the same.
Because usually what happens is the person buying wants something different because they want to try everything. And I don't know that that's the case. I see what you're saying. You do want everything to be as consistent as possible.
Right.
Because again,
Walmart's now,
Right. But not necessarily from a supplement. Look, I'm not huge on supplements. I hadn't touched on them yet, but I can cover that in 2 minutes. Supplements, in my opinion, are just that. They're never going to be a deal maker and they're never going to be a deal breaker. It doesn't matter if you're doing a show or if you're trying to gain muscle, whatever. The only thing that truly works are drugs. And I'm not saying that like everybody should use drugs. What I'm saying is, don't kid yourself, because anything you buy over the counter works this much. And then the argument is, well, if it only works this much, if I take it for a year, well, if you take something and you spend money on something and you use it for a year and you can't see a legitimate, like you can't quantify a legitimate difference, then why take it? You know what I mean? It's the same with creatine. Creatine, I laugh. I mean, I had a creatine in one of the things that I had my clients use and I used for a long time. And then they just discontinued it. And this is through my nutrition company with my name on it. And I'm like, how could you guys do that? All my clients use it. And I'm thinking, oh, I can't use it anymore. I'm not going to be strong. And I didn't use it for a month and I laughed. I'm like, I don't even notice the difference. So it wasn't a loss to me because I get all my stuff for free. But to my clients who are paying a good amount of money for this supplement, I'm going, and they're asking me, they're just dying for something else to take. What do I take? I'm not taking anything. I'm like, well, have you noticed anything? No, not really. Then don't buy anything else. You know, there isn't a lot of stuff out there that's going to make a huge difference, except for the things that nobody wants you to take because they're drugs. They actually are drugs because they work. So anything over the counter, there's just no sense. In my opinion, there's no sense. Your protein powder, of course, because these days technology, even with some of the crappier protein companies out there, they still have a relatively good quality product, and it's relatively inexpensive. It's not bad. I mean, for what you would pay for a chicken breast, you can have a protein shake. I would say not to get into carbs in your protein, because carbs and protein, anytime you drink a carbohydrate, really, it's crap. I don't care if they call it Swedish oat starch or anything else, it's still a powder carbohydrate. And it's going to hit your bloodstream like a powder carbohydrate. So if you're taking it in post-workout, that's good. Because some fast carbs post-workout, that's fine. There's no problem there because your body needs them, it's going to suck them up. It's an insulin sensitivity issue, and it is what it is. But that's really the only time you're going to get away with that. Plus, if you're going to drink maltodextrin post-workout, because just have some kids cereal because it tastes way better anyway, and it does the same thing. You can put your protein powder over like Cocoa Krispies or something. No, I've got to have my corn waxy starch. That sounds good.
Well, you hit on something there too in terms of, you just talked about the chicken breast, for example. You know, our grandparents used to use far less oil. They would steam, for example. So you would get the benefits out of that piece of chicken without all the oil and the fats. And nowadays, it's well known that at oil manufacturers you have quality and you have quality. And some of the poorer people really are consuming stuff that are killing them and they don't even know because it's recycled oil.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's just,
right.
You know.
Well, and you know, you come around too, I think it's funny because I'm of the old school with coconut.
Yeah,
coconut oil is so bad.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's funny to see it come around now,
yeah.
And you read the research. So now I look at it as a nutritionist, I go, gosh, there's some things out there that are still archaic that we are avoiding that may well have. I think what it shows is we really know this much about nutrition as a whole. So to me, it's the most fascinating part of training or whatever. Because everything else is just so simple and so set. So you want to get bigger, lift up a big weight and put it down. I mean, eventually, if you do it enough, you're going to get bigger. But the nutrition and the supplementation, especially, I mean, they're just huge advances. You know, every few months, something else is going to happen or something else is going to come out that I have to check on and go, oh my gosh, wow, okay, cool. And it might not even be related to conditioning. It might even be related to health. And I always say, me getting older, 10 years ago, I got shingles so bad that I have nerve pain every 20 to 30 seconds along this branch around to my back, and I've had it for over 10 years. And what that did was it made me focus more on health because I was losing 60 pounds for a show, and I was thinking I was getting, I was bulking, in the off season. I had man boobs, but I was bulking in the off season. And you know, trying to do chins and ripping your bicep because you weigh 270 pounds and you have no business weighing 270 pounds. So I had to take a longer look at my health, and I try now to push as hard as I can, push that on other people, because even if you're not, even if you look at it and go, yeah, but Skip, you're old, I'm not old. You're gonna be one of these days. And if you're only training for a few years, more power to you. But if you're gonna train and you have longevity in mind, shameless plug for an awesome DVD. Yeah, good looking cat too, I guess. Anyway, if you're in it for the long haul, you gotta think about it. Your training, your joints, you know, you gotta train right. You gotta take care of yourself, and you just can't be dumping garbage in, because there's gonna come a day where you're gonna pay the price. You're just going to. You know, and there's a whole lot of other things, belts, no belts, and you know, when you get into training and the longevity part of it. I don't want to you know, keep you guys long. I'd be happy to answer questions and things like that, but what I did want to do is I wanted to touch on balance, just to kind of close it out. Balance and perspective. As a competitor, it's very easy, and even as trainers, I think you guys probably do. It's just constantly consuming you. Your training, your client's training, people who just start out on a new program. It's, you know, you're probably looking at, go, man, I lost 50 pounds, and you know, you might even think about competing, and you're thinking, how can I get my abs thicker? And it'll start to, it can anyway, it can consume you, and it can kind of get in the way of other things, especially as a competitor. And I just really want to push not only the health aspect of it, but to keep it all in perspective and to find that balance, because a lot of people think the more time and the more effort they put into it, the more successful they're going to be. But a one-dimensional person is a pretty boring person to talk to. There's nothing worse than when I sit down and people just want to talk. Here's different. We can talk about nutrition, and I'm happy to talk about it. But if you were sitting at the resort, you came up to me, you wanted to know how much I benched and what I ate and everything else, I would just sit there thinking I'd sooner slit my wrist and talk about it. Like, can't we talk about guns or trucks or something cool, you know, fun? Let's talk about guys stuff. It's that one-dimensional, and people who train and work out, and especially competitors, are terrible for it. They'll just get around other competitors. Then they just sit there and they tell everybody how great they are and how awesome they look, and that's all they ever talk about. So it can be hard. And trainers, it's difficult too, because your friends are probably trainers, you're around your trainers all the time, and it can become consuming. And you won't progress any quicker. I think that's the misconception. If I do this, and Phil Heaton doesn't sit there and he tries not to anyway. It's hard at that level because with his travel and what he does, it really is like that. We'll sit there and play black ops for hours for probably no other reason than just to get away from a bodybuilding type of environment, I guess. And he likes to talk about other stuff too. That's why people like that at pool, in the sense that they can balance themselves out and they can talk about other things. Not going to get any better focusing on lifting the weights and dieting and that sort of thing. Having a bad meal, again, it's consistency, not perfection. You go out, you go on vacation, I have no worries about it at all. My ankles start to swell up, I figure, you know what, I'm out for a week. I haven't taken a week of not eating all year, eating whatever I want. And then I'll go back and I'll clean up the mess when I get back and drop 20 pounds. I feel a whole lot better. When I smile, my eyes won't close, things like that.